A boot slammed down on rotted wood. The plank cracked but didn't give way. A second stomp split it down the middle. Dust rose from the gap. Then something underneath knocked back. 3 slow taps. Faint. Then quiet. The big man on the porch froze. He dropped to one knee. His fingers, thick and scarred, dug into the broken board and tore it free. Another knock. Closer. Weaker. He pried up the next plank with both hands. The smell that rose from the hole stopped his breath. He had ridden past 100 cabins like this one. Today he had stopped for no reason he could explain. His name was Dutch. He had worn a Hell's Angels patch for 20 years and seen things that broke other men. What was knocking from the dark beneath that rotting old cabin should not have been alive. Stay with me on this one. The road was empty. 2 lanes. Pine trees on both sides. Dutch had been riding for 6 hours, and his back was telling him about it. He was 62 years old, and his Harley was older than most of his road brothers. He liked it that way. The bike knew him. He knew the bike. Out here in the mountains of Northern California, they were the only 2 people who needed to know anything. He had been heading east. Nothing waiting for him. Nothing chasing him. Just the road and the engine and the cold air biting at his beard. That was the way he liked it best. Then he saw the cabin. It sat back from the road, maybe 50 yards in. A dirt drive ran up to it through the trees. The roof had collapsed on one corner. The porch was sagging. One window was boarded up. The other was just a black hole. He should have ridden past. He had ridden past 1,000 places like it. But something made him slow down. Believe me, Dutch wasn't a man who trusted feelings. He trusted what he could see and what he could hit. But there was something about the way that cabin sat. Like it was waiting. Like it had been waiting a long time. He pulled the Harley off the road. Killed the engine. Set the kickstand down in the gravel. The silence that came after the engine was the loudest silence he had ever heard. He stood there for a minute. Listening. The wind moved through the pines. A crow called somewhere up the mountain. Nothing else. He started walking up the dirt drive. Now I want you to understand something about Dutch. The Hell's Angels patch on his back wasn't a costume. He had earned it the hard way. He had buried friends. He had done time. He had done things he didn't talk about and didn't apologize for. He was 62, and he walked like a man who had survived everything that had ever come at him. But as he walked up that drive, his hand drifted to the knife on his belt without him telling it to. The cabin had been empty a long time. He could see that. The windows had no glass. The door was hanging off one hinge. Dead leaves were piled up on the porch. There were no fresh tire tracks on the drive. No footprints. And yet, he stopped at the bottom of the porch steps. He looked at the boards. They were warped. Soft. The kind of wood that had been rained on for too many winters. That was when he saw the shoe. It was sitting at the corner of the porch. A child's shoe. Pink. The kind of shoe a little girl wears to school. The laces were still tied. It wasn't old. It wasn't faded. It hadn't been there for years. Dutch's breath caught. He stepped up onto the porch. Slowly. The boards creaked under his weight. He picked up the shoe. It was small enough to fit in his palm. There was dirt on it. Fresh dirt. He set it back down exactly where he had found it. Now here's the thing. Dutch had a daughter once. Long time ago. She was grown now, lived in Reno, didn't talk to him much. But he remembered when her shoes were that small. He remembered them perfectly. He stepped through the doorway into the cabin. There was no furniture, no glass on the windows. The floor was rotting in places. Something had been living in here. Animals, maybe. There was a smell. Old. Sour. He stood in the middle of the room and listened. For a long minute there was nothing. Just his own breathing. Then he heard it. A sound from below the floor. Soft. Like a fingernail scratching wood. He didn't move. He didn't breathe. It came again. A knock. One knock. Then two more. Dutch dropped his eyes to the floor. The boards under his boots were the same rotted gray as the rest. But there was a seam there. A square shape, maybe 4 feet by 4 feet. A trapdoor. Or what was left of one. Covered over. Whatever was knocking was directly under his feet. He took one step back. He pulled his knife out. And then he raised his boot and brought it down hard. The board cracked. Dutch stomped again. The wood split right down the middle, splinters jumping up. He dropped to one knee and pulled at the broken board with his bare hands. Nails screeched. The plank came up. The smell hit him first. It came up out of that hole like something that had been trapped a long time. Dust. Sweat. Worse things. Dutch had smelled bad smells in his life. This was a bad smell. It was the smell of someone who had been somewhere they shouldn't have been for too long. He held his breath. He pried up the next board. Then the next. Sunlight was finding its way down into the hole now, weak and gray. And then he saw her. She was lying on her side on the bare dirt under the cabin. Her knees pulled up. Her hands tucked under her chin. Her hair was matted. Her face was streaked with dirt. She was wearing a thin t-shirt and one shoe. The other foot was bare. Her eyes were open. They were looking right up at him. She looked maybe 9 years old. Maybe 10. Hard to tell. She was very small. Dutch heard his own voice come out of his mouth, and it didn't sound like his voice. Hey. Hey, sweetheart. Hey. She didn't move. She just blinked at him. Slow. Like she wasn't sure if he was real. He tore up 2 more boards. The hole was big enough now for him to get through. He got down on his stomach and reached his arms down into the dark. I'm gonna pick you up. Okay. I'm gonna pick you up real careful. She tried to talk. Her lips moved. Nothing came out. Dutch slid his arms under her. She weighed nothing. Less than nothing. He lifted her up through the hole and onto the rotted floor. She was so light it scared him. He sat down right there on the boards and held her in his lap. His leather jacket was already coming off. He wrapped it around her. His hands were shaking. Dutch had not had shaking hands in 40 years. You're okay, he said. You're okay now. I got you. You're okay. He pulled out his canteen. He uncapped it. He didn't pour the water into her mouth. He knew better than that. He wet his finger and ran it over her cracked lips. Then he wet his finger again. He did it slow. After a minute, her tongue came out and touched his finger. She was alive. She was alive. He looked around the room. Empty. Boarded up. Nothing here that should have a child in it. That was when he saw the wall. There was a Polaroid nailed to the wall by the door. Just one. He hadn't seen it on the way in because the angle was wrong. From the floor where he was sitting, he could see it clear. It was a picture of her. Of this little girl. Standing in front of this same cabin. Her hands were tied in front of her. There was tape over her mouth. Someone was standing behind her. You could only see his arm and the bottom of his jacket. He was holding up the front page of a newspaper. A trophy photo. Dutch had seen things in his life. He had seen things that kept other men awake at night and didn't bother him. But that photo on that wall, that put something cold inside his chest. He pulled out his cell phone. No signal. Of course not. They were in the mountains. He should have known. He looked down at the girl. She was looking up at him. Her eyes were big and dark, and she was studying his beard. His patches. His face. "What's your name, sweetheart?" She blinked. "M," she whispered. "M," he said. "M what?" "Emma." Her voice was so small he had to bend down to hear it. Emma Lake. Dutch had heard that name. He had heard it on the radio, coming through the mountains 2 days back. A girl. Missing 6 days from a campground outside Redding. The whole state was looking for her. She was right here. In his arms. He had stopped at a rotting cabin for no reason he could name, and she was right here in his arms. "Emma," he said. "I'm Dutch. I'm gonna get you home. You hear me? I'm gonna get you home to your folks." She nodded once. Just once. Then she closed her eyes. That scared him more than anything. "Hey, Emma, stay with me." She opened her eyes again. Slow. He stood up, carried her out the front door. The light hit her face and she squinted hard. She had been in that hole a long time. He set her down on the top step of the porch, sat next to her, wrapped his jacket tighter around her shoulders, got the canteen out again, did the finger thing. She drank a little. Just a little. He had to get her to a hospital. He had to get her on the bike. He could put her in front of him, hold her there with one arm, ride one-handed down the mountain. He had ridden one-handed before, but never with something this precious in front of him. He just needed a minute. She needed a minute. Her body was barely there. He sat with her on that porch, and he listened to her breathe. Her breathing got a little stronger. A little stronger. The wind moved through the pines. The crow was gone now. Somewhere far off, an engine. Probably a logging truck on the highway. Dutch closed his eyes for 1 second. 1 second of not being ready. The world had gone quiet. The girl was alive. She was breathing. The worst part was over. That was what he thought, sitting on that porch with Emma Lake in his coat. The worst part was over. The engine he had heard was not on the highway. It was coming up the dirt drive. Dutch heard the gear change. The truck slowed. Then it kept coming. His head snapped up. He was off the porch in 2 seconds. Emma was in his arms again, jacket and all. He moved fast. Around the side of the cabin. Behind a stack of old firewood. He set her down behind the woodpile and put a finger to his lips. She stared at him. She understood. God help her, she understood. He came back around the corner just enough to see the drive. A pickup truck was rolling up. Old. Brown. Mud caked up to the running boards. The front bumper was bent. Dutch could see 2 heads in the cab through the dirty windshield. 2 men. The truck stopped 20 yards from the cabin. The driver door opened. A man got out. Tall. Lean. Long hair pulled back. He was carrying a hunting rifle in one hand like he carried it everywhere. The passenger door opened. A second man. Shorter. Heavier. Bald head. He was holding a plastic shopping bag in one hand. Food, maybe. Water. Whatever you bring to keep someone alive long enough to keep them. Dutch's jaw went tight. He had been thinking this was a rescue. It was not a rescue anymore. A rescue is when you pull someone out of trouble and ride away. This was something else now. The men who had put her in that hole had come back. And they had a rifle. If they got to the cabin before Dutch got Emma to the bike, this ended one way. If they saw the broken floorboards, it ended another way. Either way, he had about 30 seconds to decide. He looked at his Harley sitting out on the road, 50 yards away, down a dirt drive, with 2 armed men standing between him and it. That wasn't going to work. He looked at the woods behind the cabin. Dense, dark, going up the mountain. That was something. He crouched back down behind the woodpile. Emma's eyes were huge. Her hands were clutching the leather of his jacket like she was going to fall off the edge of the world. "Emma," he whispered, "I need you to do exactly what I say. Can you do that?" She nodded. "I'm gonna pick you up and I'm gonna run. You hold on tight. You don't make a sound. Not one sound. Even if you're scared. Even if it hurts. Not one sound. You understand?" She nodded again. "Good girl." He picked her up, tucked her against his chest. Her arms went around his neck. He felt her shaking. Or maybe that was him. He could hear the men talking now. Their voices were getting closer. They were walking up to the porch. Dutch ran. He went straight back, away from the cabin, into the trees. He didn't run fast, he couldn't, not with her in his arms, but he ran steady. Branches scraped his arms. His boots crunched dead leaves. He kept his head low. 40 yards in, he stopped behind a fallen log. He set Emma down, got her low to the ground, pulled the jacket up over her head. "Stay here," he whispered. "You stay right here. You don't come out for anybody but me. Not anybody. You hear me?" She grabbed his hand. "You come back," she whispered. It wasn't a question. It was an instruction. "I'm coming back." He pulled his hand free. He drew his knife. "If you've stayed with me this far, do me a favor, hit that subscribe button. There are more stories like this one coming, and I want you here for them. Now let's get back to it." Dutch moved through the trees like a man who had hunted before. He had hunted in his life. He had also been hunted. He knew both ends of it. He circled around the cabin, came up on it from the south side, through the brush. The 2 men were on the porch now. The tall one was kneeling by the broken floorboards. The bald one was standing over him with the rifle. Their voices were loud. Angry. "She's gone. She can't be gone. Look at her. She couldn't crawl out of that hole. Then somebody got her out." The tall one stood up. He looked around. Slow. Careful. He was reading the porch. The dirt. The drive. He stopped at the bottom of the steps and pointed. "Bike tracks. Out by the road." The bald one swore. That was when the third one came around the side of the truck. Dutch hadn't seen him before. He had been in the bed of the truck under a tarp, maybe. Or asleep in the back seat. He was the biggest of the 3. He had a hunting knife on his belt. The handle was bone or antler. There was a name carved into it. Dutch couldn't read it from here, but he saw the carving catch the light. 3 men. 1 rifle. 1 knife visible. Probably more weapons in the truck. 62-year-old biker. 1 blade. 1 body. 1 little girl behind a log 40 yards into the woods. The math was bad. Dutch had been in bad math before. He started moving. The first thing Dutch did was the truck. He stayed low. moved through the brush, came up on the truck from the back. He went to the rear tire on the driver's side, and he put his knife into the sidewall. The blade went in deep. Air hissed out slow and steady. He moved to the other rear tire. Same thing. Slow puncture. By the time they noticed, they wouldn't be driving anywhere. Then he saw the rifle. The bald one had set it down on the porch railing while he climbed down into the hole to look at the dirt. He had set it right there, in plain sight, like nobody was going to come along and take it. Dutch took it. He came up onto the porch behind him. He didn't make a sound. He picked up the rifle by the barrel. He was 3 feet from the bald man when the bald man started to turn around. Dutch swung the rifle stock like he was swinging a baseball bat. The wood cracked across the side of the bald man's head. He went down hard, his face hitting the porch boards. He didn't get back up. The tall one was still inside the cabin, still looking at the broken floor. He heard the thud. He came running out the door with his rifle coming up. Dutch was already there. He didn't have time to work the bolt on the rifle in his hands. He used it like a club again. He swung it across the tall man's wrists, knocking the rifle out of his hands. The tall man stumbled forward, off balance. Dutch hit him in the throat with the rifle butt. The tall man went to his knees. His hands went to his neck. Dutch kicked the rifle off the porch into the dirt. That left the third one. The big one had been over by the truck. He had heard everything. He was already coming. Knife out. The bone handle knife. Running. Dutch turned to face him. He set his rifle down. Slow. Deliberate. This one was big. Taller than Dutch. Younger. Maybe 40. He had the look of a man who liked hurting people. Dutch knew that look. He had grown up with men who had it. You picked the wrong cabin, old man. Dutch didn't answer. He had nothing to say to a man like this. The big one came at him with the knife. He was fast for his size. He came in low. Dutch turned sideways, took the knife on his forearm, felt the hot line of pain open up. He grabbed the big one's wrist with his other hand, and he twisted. He twisted and he kept twisting. Dutch had wrestled big men before. The trick wasn't strength. It was leverage. It was knowing which way a wrist did not want to go. The big one's wrist did not want to go where Dutch was sending it. Bone gave. The knife dropped. The big one screamed. Dutch picked the knife up off the porch. He held it for a second. Then he stuck it in the big one's thigh, hard, hilt deep. The big one went down screaming. Dutch left the knife where it was. The man wasn't going anywhere. He stood there on the porch. 3 men on the ground. His arm was bleeding. His hand was shaking again. His chest was working hard. He pulled the keys out of the truck's ignition, threw them into the woods. Then he gathered the rifles. Both of them. Carried them to his Harley. Strapped them down with a bungee cord like firewood. Then he ran. Back into the trees. Emma. She didn't answer. Emma, sweetheart. It's me. It's Dutch. You can come out. For one terrible second he thought she was gone. He thought maybe she had run. Or worse. Then he saw the leather jacket move. She crawled out from behind the log on her hands and knees. Her face was white. Her eyes were wet. But she was looking right at him. He picked her up. Carried her down through the trees. Past the cabin. Past the men on the porch. She turned her face into his shoulder when they passed. He didn't make her look. He set her on the gas tank of the Harley. Wrapped his right arm around her. She fit right there like she was made for it. Started the engine. The Harley came alive under them. He rolled down the dirt drive slow, made the turn onto the asphalt. Then he opened the throttle. They flew down that mountain road. Cold wind in their faces. Pine trees blurring past. Emma was buried in his jacket against his chest. He could feel her breathing. She was breathing. 6 miles down the mountain, he came to a gas station. The first one he had passed all day. He pulled in. Killed the engine. A woman was filling up her minivan. She looked at him. She looked at the little girl in his arms. She looked at the blood on his sleeve. "I need you to call 911, Dutch said. "Right now. Tell them you got Emma Lake. Tell them she's alive. Tell them there's 3 men up at a cabin on the mountain that need an ambulance and a sheriff. Tell them now." The woman didn't ask questions. She pulled out her phone with hands that were shaking, almost as bad as Dutch's were. Emma had her head on Dutch's collarbone. Her eyes were closed, but her hand was wrapped around 2 of his fingers. She was holding on. She was holding on tight. The sheriff's deputies got there in under 10 minutes. The ambulance was right behind them. Emma was carried into the back of the ambulance on a gurney that was way too big for her. They had to fold her up in it. She wouldn't let go of Dutch's fingers. The paramedic, a young woman with her hair in a braid, looked at him. "Sir, you can ride with her if you want." Dutch looked down at Emma, at her small hand around his. "Yeah," he said. "Yeah, I'm coming." He left the Harley at the gas station. He left the rifle strapped to it. The deputy said they'd have somebody pick it up. He didn't care. He climbed into the back of the ambulance, and he sat next to her, and he held her hand the whole 40 miles down to the hospital in Redding. She fell asleep about 10 miles in. Real sleep. Her breathing got slow and steady. The paramedic looked at his arm. The cut from the knife was deep but clean. She wrapped it. She told him he'd need stitches. He said okay. At the hospital, they took Emma straight back. They wouldn't let him go with her. They put him in a different room. A nurse cleaned his arm and stitched it up. 11 stitches. He didn't flinch. He was sitting on the edge of the hospital bed when the door opened. A woman came in. She was maybe 40. Dark hair pulled back. Red eyes. She had been crying for a long time by the look of her. A man was right behind her. He wasn't crying. He looked like he had forgotten how. The woman stopped 2 feet from Dutch. She just looked at him. Her mouth was open, but no sound was coming out. Then she fell on him. She wrapped her arms around his neck, and she sobbed into his shoulder, and she said thank you about 100 times. She kept saying it. She couldn't stop. The man, Emma's father, he stood behind his wife, and he put one hand on Dutch's shoulder and he squeezed it, and he didn't say anything because there were no words for what he wanted to say. Dutch sat there with this stranger crying on his shoulder, and he didn't know what to do with his hands. He had been a Hell's Angel for 20 years. Nobody hugged him. Nobody had hugged him in a long, long time. He patted her on the back. "Awkward." He said, "She's gonna be okay. She's a tough kid." The mother pulled back. She looked him in the face. "Why did you stop?" "Ma'am, at that cabin. Why did you stop there? Of all the cabins on that road. Why that one?" Dutch thought about it. "I don't know, ma'am. I really don't. Something just told me to." She nodded. She wiped her face. She nodded again. Like that was the only answer that made any sense. Now here's the thing. The story got picked up by every news station between Sacramento and Seattle. They wanted Dutch on television. They wanted him on the morning shows. They wanted him in magazines. He said no to all of it. He didn't want his face anywhere. He had reasons for that, and they were his reasons. The 3 men at the cabin all lived. The big one with the knife in his leg almost didn't, but he did. They were arrested at the hospital. The investigation that followed turned up things nobody wanted to know. Other photos. Other names. A whole pattern of cabins on a whole network of back roads. The FBI got involved. Other children got found. Some of them alive. That part of the story is its own story. It's not Dutch's story. Dutch's story is what happened 6 months later. A black sedan pulled up to a roadhouse outside Reno. Dutch was sitting at the bar. The Hells Angels patch was on the back of his cut. He was eating a cheeseburger and listening to the jukebox. A little girl walked into the roadhouse. She was wearing a denim jacket. Her hair was clean. Her cheeks were full. She was holding a folded piece of paper in one hand. Her parents stayed by the door. Emma walked across the roadhouse floor. Right up to the bar. Right up to Dutch. Every man in the place was watching. Nobody made a sound. She held the folded paper up to him. "I made you something." Dutch took the paper. He unfolded it. It was a drawing. Crayon. A stick figure man on a motorcycle. The man had a beard. He had a circle over his head, a halo. The motorcycle had the words HELLS Angel written on it in big shaky letters. There was a little girl on the front of the motorcycle. She was smiling. Dutch looked at it for a long time. "You drew this for me." "I drew it for you." He folded it back up. "Careful." He put it in the inside pocket of his cut, right against his chest. "Thank you, sweetheart." She looked up at him. Her eyes were dark and clear. She wasn't shaking anymore. She wasn't dirty. She was a little girl with a denim jacket and a drawing. "You came back." "I came back. I knew you would." She turned and walked back to her parents. They waved at Dutch. He raised his beer to them. They left. The roadhouse was quiet for about 10 seconds. Then somebody put another song on the jukebox, and the noise came back. Dutch finished his cheeseburger. He paid his tab. He walked out to his Harley. He sat on it for a minute before he turned it on. He pulled the drawing out of his cut. Looked at it again. The halo. The shaky letters. The smiling girl on the bike. He had ridden past 1,000 cabins in his life. He had stopped at one. He folded the drawing up and put it back. He started the engine. He pulled out onto the highway. The road went on, the way a road goes on. He went with it.